The Kid with the Golden Arm wasn't just another kung fu movie. It was a blood-soaked ballet where the hero couldn't throw a punch. The final fight scene sent 7 stuntmen to the hospital. The golden arms, they were so heavy, the lead actor nearly drowned wearing them. And the director, he shot the entire finale twice because the first version was deemed too violent for Asian markets. These are 20 weird facts about the Kid with the Golden Arm. And the bonus? There's a reason the film's most iconic weapon appears in almost every martial arts video game made after 1985. Raise your fists. This story hits harder than you think. Number 1. Chang Che didn't want to make another kung fu film. By 1979, he'd already directed over 80 martial arts movies for Shaw Brothers, and he was exhausted. Blood-soaked warriors, elaborate fight choreography, endless wire work. He'd seen it all, done it all, and wanted out. He told the studio he needed a break, maybe even a different genre entirely. Something quieter, more psychological. The executives nodded politely, then handed him the script for The Kid with the Golden Arm anyway. It wasn't a request. Shaw Brothers had built an empire on kung fu, and Chang Che was their most reliable architect. They needed a film that could compete with the rising independent studios, something with spectacle, violence, and a hook audiences hadn't seen before. So, Chang read the script reluctantly, expecting the usual revenge tale with flying kicks and honor codes. But buried in those pages was something different, a hero who didn't rely on traditional martial arts, a villain so theatrically evil he bordered on opera, and a climax that would require more fake blood than any Shaw Brothers production had ever used. Chang Che put the script down, looked at the executives, and said one word, fine. But he had conditions. He wanted complete creative control over the violence, the casting, and the ending. The studio agreed, figuring they'd rein him in during editing. They were wrong. What Chang Che delivered wasn't just another kung fu film. It was a nightmare painted in primary colors, and it changed everything. Number 2. The golden arms weren't gold. They were brass, painted, heavy, and dangerous. Each gauntlet weighed roughly 12 pounds, and when strapped onto an actor's forearms, they became weapons in more ways than one. The design was supposed to look mythical, indestructible, something out of ancient legend, and they did. But wearing them for hours on set was torture. The lead actor, Lo Meng, had to perform fight choreography with 24 extra pounds on his arms. Every punch felt like swinging sledgehammers. Every block sent shockwaves up to his shoulders. Between takes, he'd beg the crew to remove them so his arms could breathe. But there was no time. The shooting schedule was brutal, and Chang Che didn't believe in long breaks. So, Lo Meng adapted. He trained with the gauntlets during pre-production, building up arm strength, learning to move with the weight instead of against it. But even that wasn't enough. During one fight sequence filmed near a river, Lo Meng lost his balance mid-stunt and fell into the water. The brass arms dragged him down instantly. He couldn't swim. He couldn't release the straps fast enough. For a few terrifying seconds, the crew watched him sink, thrashing, panicking. 2 stuntmen dove in and pulled him out, coughing, drenched, traumatized. They dried off the gauntlets, checked the paint, and kept filming. Because in 1979 Shaw Brothers Productions, the show always went on, even if the hero nearly drowned. Number 3. Before Lo Meng wore those golden arms, they almost went to someone else entirely. The studio wanted a bigger name, someone with international recognition who could carry the film beyond Asian markets. Their first choice was David Chiang, Chang Che's frequent collaborator and one of Shaw Brothers' biggest stars. Chiang had the look, the presence, the martial arts credibility. He'd already headlined dozens of successful films, and audiences trusted him. But when the studio approached him with the script, Chiang read it once and said no. Not because the role was bad, because it terrified him. The Kid with the Golden Arm wasn't a traditional martial artist. He was almost superhuman, a silent force of destruction who absorbed punishment and kept moving forward. Chiang said the character had no depth, no arc, just violence. He didn't want to spend months on set getting brutalized for a role that felt one-dimensional. The studio panicked. They needed a star, and fast. So they turned to Lo Meng, a member of the Venom mob. Shaw Brothers' elite group of young martial artists. Lo Meng was strong, disciplined, and hungry for a lead role. He said yes immediately. No hesitation, no negotiations. He saw the Golden Arms as his breakout moment, and he was right. But years later, in interviews, he admitted he understood why Chiang walked away. The role nearly destroyed his body. Bruises that lasted months, joint pain that never fully healed. The Golden Arms gave him fame, but they also left scars. Number 4. The villain in The Kid with the Golden Arm wasn't just evil. He was theatrical, almost operatic in his cruelty. And the actor who brought him to life, Feng, didn't audition. He was camping, literally. Feng had taken a rare break from the Shaw Brothers grind and gone hiking in the mountains outside Hong Kong, trying to disconnect from the chaos of studio life. No scripts, no schedules, just silence and trees. But Chang Che tracked him down anyway. He drove up the mountain himself, found Feng's campsite, and sat down by the fire uninvited. He told Feng about the role, a sadistic martial arts master who commands a small army and enjoys watching people suffer. Most actors would have been offended by the interruption. Feng was intrigued. He asked Chang Che one question: "Can I make him laugh?" The director paused. In most kung fu films, villains were stoic, cold, menacing through silence. But Chang Che saw the potential immediately. A villain who laughed while killing, who found joy in chaos, that was terrifying in a completely different way. He told Feng, yes, do whatever you want. Just make him unforgettable. So, Feng came back from the mountains, walked onto set, and created one of the most unsettling antagonists in Shaw Brothers' history. Every kill was accompanied by a giggle, every threat delivered with a smile. He wasn't just dangerous, he was unhinged, and audiences couldn't look away.
They intend to hijack the gold.
Number 5. The fight choreography in The Kid with the Golden Arm required precision, but it also required pain. The film's action director, Tang Chia, had one rule: make it real. Not realistic, real. He wanted the audience to feel every punch, every break, every moment of impact. So he instructed the stunt team to hold back less than usual. In most Shaw Brothers films, fight scenes were highly controlled. Punches stopped inches from faces. Kicks landed softly, enhanced later with sound effects. But for this film, Tang Chia wanted contact. He wanted bruises. The stunt performers agreed reluctantly, and the results were immediate. During the first major fight sequence, 3 stuntmen ended up with cracked ribs. Another broke his nose when a mistimed kick connected harder than planned. The on-set medic became the busiest person in the crew, patching up injuries between takes, handing out painkillers like candy. Lo Meng himself took a wooden staff to the back that left him unable to stand upright for 2 days. But he didn't complain. None of them did. Because Tang Chia had promised them something. If they gave him real pain, he'd give them real glory. And he delivered. The fights in The Kid with the Golden Arm are visceral, chaotic, brutal in ways most kung fu films of the era avoided. You can see the exhaustion in the actors' eyes, the genuine struggle in their movements. That wasn't acting, that was survival. And it became the film's greatest strength, proving that sometimes the best action doesn't come from safety, it comes from risk. Number 6. Chang Che had a problem. The script called for a massive final battle, an all-out war between the heroes and an army of assassins. But the budget didn't support it. Shaw Brothers had given him enough money for sets, costumes, and the core cast, but not for the 100+ extras a sequence like that would require. So, Chang Che got creative. He convinced local martial arts schools to lend him their students for free. In exchange, he promised them screen time and the chance to work with Tang Chia, one of the industry's most respected choreographers. Dozens of young fighters showed up, eager, untrained in film work, but hungry for the opportunity. The problem was, they weren't actors. They didn't know how to sell a hit, how to fall convincingly, or how to move in sync with the camera. Tang Chia spent days drilling them, teaching them the basics of stunt performance while simultaneously choreographing the battle itself. It was chaos. Some students got hurt. Others quit after the first day. But the ones who stayed, they gave everything. And when the cameras rolled for the final fight, it looked massive. Not because of special effects or clever editing, though those helped, but because 60 untrained fighters threw themselves into the scene with the kind of raw energy professionals had long since learned to control. The sequence cost almost nothing, but it looked like $1 million set piece. And that gamble, that willingness to turn amateurs into an army, became one of the most iconic moments in Shaw Brothers history. Number 7. The film's most brutal scene didn't involve the golden arms at all. It was a torture sequence midway through the film where several characters are subjected to horrific punishments. Skin peeling, bone breaking, methods designed to make the audience squirm. Chang Che wanted it graphic, unflinching, something that would establish just how dangerous the villains were. But the Shaw Brothers censorship board had other ideas. They watched the dailies and immediately flagged the scene. Too violent, they said, too disturbing for general audiences. Cut it or tone it down. Chang Che refused. He argued that the torture was essential to the story, that without it, the hero's eventual revenge would feel hollow. The board didn't care. They threatened to shelve the entire film if he didn't comply. So, Chang Che did something unusual. He shot the scene twice. One version with everything he wanted, full gore, full horror, every twisted detail. And another version, sanitized, implied violence rather than explicit. When the board reviewed the tamer cut, they approved it reluctantly, but Chang Che had already made his decision. He submitted the sanitized version for the Asian release, knowing it would pass censors across multiple countries. But for international markets, particularly in Europe and select American cities, he slipped in the uncut version. Audiences in Hong Kong saw restraint. Audiences in Paris and New York saw carnage. And neither group knew the other version existed until years later, when home video releases started comparing regional cuts. The torture scene became legendary, not just for its content, but for the fact that Chang Che outsmarted the system.
Number 8.
Lo Meng wasn't supposed to survive the film. In the original script, the kid with the golden arm died at the end, sacrificing himself to ensure the gold reached its destination. It was meant to be tragic, heroic, a reminder that even the strongest warriors are mortal. Chang Che loved the ending. He thought it gave the film weight, elevated it beyond typical revenge fantasies. But the studio hated it. They argued that Shaw Brothers audiences didn't want tragedy. They wanted triumph. They wanted the hero to walk away, battered but alive, ready for a sequel if the box office demanded one. Chang Che fought back. He said killing the hero was the whole point, that resurrection and survival had been done to death. The studio didn't budge, so they compromised in the strangest way possible. They filmed both endings. The tragic one where Lo Meng's character collapses, bleeding out, dying in the arms of his companions while triumphant music played. And the hopeful one where he survives, wounded but standing, walking off into the sunset. When test audiences saw both versions, the results were split almost perfectly down the middle. Half wanted the death, half wanted the survival. So the studio made a decision, release different endings in different territories. Some countries got the tragic version, others got the hero's survival. And for decades, fans argued about which ending was real until home video releases finally included both, letting viewers decide for themselves which fate the kid with the golden arm truly deserved. Number 9. The golden arms had a secret. They weren't just props, they were loaded. Inside each gauntlet, special effects artists hid small explosive charges designed to create sparks during key fight moments. The idea was simple. When the golden arms blocked a blade or deflected a weapon, they'd erupt in a shower of sparks, making the hero seem almost supernatural. It looked incredible on screen, but it was wildly dangerous. The charges were unstable, sensitive to heat and impact, and Lo Meng was wearing them. During one fight scene, a charge detonated prematurely, sending a burst of sparks directly into Lo Meng's face. He stumbled backward, temporarily blinded, disoriented. The crew rushed in, dousing the gauntlet, checking for burns. Lo Meng's face was singed but not seriously injured. They reset, checked the remaining charges, and kept filming. But Lo Meng was rattled. He'd signed up to get punched, kicked, thrown around. He hadn't signed up to wear explosives. Tang Chia assured him the charges were safe, that the premature detonation was a fluke. Lo Meng didn't believe him, but he put the gauntlets back on anyway. Because that's what you did in Shaw Brothers productions. You trusted the choreographer, even when the props were trying to kill you. The spark stayed in the film. They became one of the Golden Arm's signature visual effects. But every time you see them on screen, remember, those weren't added in post-production. Those were real explosions, inches from an actor's skin. Number 10. Halfway through production, the entire set caught fire. It wasn't arson, it wasn't sabotage, it was exhaustion and carelessness meeting at the worst possible moment. One of the lighting technicians had been working 18-hour days for 2 weeks straight. During a night shoot, he positioned a high-wattage lamp too close to a fabric backdrop. The heat built up slowly, unnoticed, until the fabric ignited. Within seconds, flames spread across the set, consuming wooden props, painted backdrops. The crew scrambled, grabbing extinguishers, pulling equipment away from the blaze. Chang Che stood in the middle of the chaos, not panicking, just watching his film burn. By the time they got it under control, half the set was destroyed. Costumes ruined, props melted, weeks of work reduced to ash. The studio wanted to shut down production, cut their losses, maybe even scrap the film entirely. But Chang Che refused. He walked through the wreckage, surveyed what was left, and made a decision. They'd rebuild, but not everything. He'd rewrite scenes to work around the missing sets, shift locations, turn the disaster into an opportunity for something different. And that's exactly what happened. Some of the film's most visually striking moments, scenes shot in stark, minimalist locations, only exist because the original set burned down. The fire didn't kill the film. It forced everyone to get more creative. And in the end, the kid with the golden arm emerged stronger, stranger, and more unforgettable than anyone had planned. Number 11. The film's most iconic weapon wasn't the golden arms. It was the iron robe, a defensive technique that made the villain's henchman nearly invulnerable. His body could deflect blades, absorb punches, withstand attacks that would kill ordinary fighters. And the visual effect wasn't CGI or camera tricks. It was practical, dangerous, and it required one stuntman to endure hell. His name was Chiang Sheng, another member of the Venom mob, and he volunteered to play the Iron Robe fighter, knowing it meant 3 weeks of getting hit with real weapons. The choreography called for him to stand motionless while other fighters struck him with staffs, chains, and blunted swords. The impacts had to look real, because they were. Tang Chia instructed the stunt team to hold back just enough to avoid breaking bones, but not enough to look fake. Chang Sheng took the punishment without complaint, his body covered in protective padding, hidden under his costume. But the padding only did so much. After each day of shooting, he'd peel off his costume to reveal massive bruises, welts that turned purple and black, skin so tender he couldn't sleep on his back. The medic offered him breaks. Chang Sheng refused. He'd committed to the role, and in Shaw Brothers culture, commitment meant suffering through. By the final fight, when the iron robe technique is finally broken, Chang Sheng's screams were real. Not because the script called for it, but because he'd been holding in 3 weeks of pain and finally had permission to let it out. That scene became legendary in martial arts cinema, studied by fight choreographers for decades. And every time someone references the Iron Robe in a video game, a comic, or another film, they're paying tribute to a stuntman who turned his body into a weapon and took the hit so the audience could believe in the impossible.
The Chisar have 4 chiefs. Golden arm.
Number 12. The film's score almost didn't exist. Shaw Brothers typically use stock music from their library, recycling themes from previous films to save money. But Chang Che wanted something different for the kid with the golden arm. He wanted a soundtrack that felt operatic, tragic, something that elevated the violence into something almost beautiful. So, he fought for an original score. The studio said no, pointing to the budget already stretched thin after the set fire. Chang Che didn't argue. He just went around them. He contacted composer Chen Young-yu privately, explained his vision, and asked if he'd work for almost nothing with the promise of future projects. Chen agreed, intrigued by the challenge. He composed the score in 2 weeks, working nights after his day job, crafting themes that blended traditional Chinese instruments with Western orchestration. When Chang Che heard the first recordings, he knew he'd found something special. But getting the studio to approve it required deception. He edited a rough cut of the film, using the stock music library, showed it to executives, and they approved it for release. Then, quietly, he swapped in Chen's original score during the final sound mix. By the time anyone noticed, the film was already being duplicated for distribution. Too late to change. The studio was furious, but they couldn't deny the results. The score elevated every scene, turned brutal fights into tragic ballets, made the audience feel the weight of each death. Chen Yong-yu's career exploded after that, and he went on to score dozens of martial arts classics. But it all started with a director who believed rules were made to be broken, as long as you broke them quietly enough.
Number 13.
Lo Meng had a secret during filming. He was injured badly, and he hid it from everyone for 3 days. During a rooftop fight sequence, he landed wrong after a jump. Felt something snap in his ankle. The pain was immediate, blinding, but he couldn't stop. They were behind schedule, over budget, and any delay would mean reshoots that could bankrupt the production. So, he gritted his teeth, finished the scene, and told no one. Between takes, he'd limp to a corner, sit down, remove his boot to reveal an ankle swelling to twice its normal size, turning dark purple. He'd wrap it tight, shove his foot back into the boot, and return to set. At night, he'd ice it in his hotel room, pop painkillers, and pray it wasn't broken. The choreography got harder each day. Scenes that required running, jumping, spinning, every movement sent shocks of agony up his leg, but he never let it show on camera. On the third day, during a particularly complex fight, his ankle gave out completely. He collapsed mid-take, couldn't get up, couldn't hide it anymore. The medic examined him immediately and confirmed what Lo Meng already knew: a severe sprain bordering on a fracture. He should have stopped filming days ago. Tang Chia was furious, not because Lo Meng was injured, but because he'd hidden it and could have made it worse. They shut down for 2 days while Lo Meng's ankle was properly treated, wrapped, stabilized. When filming resumed, the choreography was adjusted to minimize stress on his leg. But Lo Meng never apologized for hiding the injury. In his mind, the film came first. Always. Number 14, the kid with the golden arm wasn't the hero's only name. In different international markets, he was called different things. The brass fighter in Germany, the invincible armored man in France, Golden Warrior in parts of Southeast Asia. This wasn't unusual for Shaw Brothers films, which often got retitled based on what distributors thought would sell. But the confusion went deeper. Some posters featured characters who weren't even in the film. Others promised storylines that didn't exist. In Italy, one distributor marketed it as a sequel to Five Deadly Venoms, even though the films had completely different plots. The only connection was that both featured members of the Venom mob. Audiences showed up expecting one thing and got something entirely different. Some walked out, others stayed, confused but entertained. The strangest retitling happened in South America, where one distributor called it The Man with the Iron Fists, a title that would be reused decades later for an entirely different martial arts film. This marketing chaos created a bizarre situation. The same movie existed under a dozen different identities, sometimes screening simultaneously in neighboring countries under completely different names. Film historians spent years trying to untangle which version was which cuts were authentic, and which titles Chang-che actually approved. The answer? Almost none of them. He'd lost control of his film the moment it left Shaw Brothers. It belonged to the world now, and the world renamed it however it pleased. Number 15. There's a reason the kid with the golden arm influenced video game designers for decades. The concept was perfect for interactive media. A fighter with unique weapons, defensive capabilities that required strategy to overcome, and a visual style that translated beautifully to pixel art. In the mid-1980s, Japanese arcade developers studying martial arts films for inspiration discovered the Shaw Brothers catalog. The kid with the golden arm caught their attention immediately. Not just the golden arms themselves, but the entire rogues gallery of fighters. The iron robe, the thousand-hand Buddha, the silver spear. Each villain had a distinct fighting style, a gimmick, a visual hook. Game designers recognize this as natural boss progression. You fight through increasingly difficult opponents, each requiring different tactics. By the late 1980s, elements from the film started appearing everywhere. Characters with metallic arms in final fight. Invulnerable enemies who could only be defeated by finding their weak point. Even the aesthetic, that mix of realistic martial arts and supernatural abilities, became a staple of the fighting game genre. Street Fighter, Mortal Kombat, countless others borrowed either directly or through cultural osmosis. The filmmakers never received royalties, never got credit beyond vague acknowledgments in developer interviews years later. But their influence is undeniable. Every time you fight a boss with golden gauntlets, every time you face an enemy with an iron body technique, you're experiencing an echo of a 1979 Shaw Brothers film that most gamers have never heard of. The Kid with the Golden Arm didn't just entertain audiences, it created a visual language that defined a medium.
Number 16.
The final fight wasn't choreographed. Not entirely. Tang Chia had planned the broad strokes, the major beats, who would fight whom, and in what order. But the details, the individual exchanges, he left those to the performers. On the day of shooting, he gathered the stunt team and told them, "Make it real, make it desperate, make it feel like everyone might die." Then he stepped back and let them improvise. What followed was controlled chaos. Fighters who'd trained together for months, who knew each other's styles, strengths, weaknesses, now turned that knowledge against each other. They weren't acting, they were sparring, genuinely competing to see who could create the most memorable moment. Lo Meng fought with exhausted fury, his injured ankle screaming, but his movements still sharp. Chang Sheng absorbed punishment like his character's iron robe had merged with his actual body. Ku Feng circled the carnage, laughing, ad-libbing threats that weren't in the script. The cameras rolled continuously, capturing everything. Some takes went wrong, performers mistimed blocks, took harder hits than intended, fell in ways that looked wrong on camera. But other takes transcended choreography entirely and became something raw and true. Tang Chia watched it all, calling out adjustments between takes, but mostly letting the chaos flow. When they finally wrapped, 7 stuntmen needed medical attention. Broken fingers, sprained wrists, one dislocated shoulder. But they'd created something unprecedented, a fight scene that felt genuinely dangerous because for everyone involved, it was. Number 17, Ku Feng never watched the finished film. Not at the premiere, not during its theatrical run, never. After wrapping his final scene, he left the set and moved on to his next project without looking back. This wasn't unusual for him. He'd appeared in over 400 films during his career and claimed he had only watched about 20 of them. Acting was work, not art, and once the job was done, he had no interest in seeing himself on screen. But years later, fans wouldn't let it go. They'd approach him at conventions, at restaurant openings, anywhere he appeared publicly. They'd quote his lines, mimic his laugh, tell him how much his performance had meant to them. And Ku Feng would smile politely, nod, thank them, all while having no idea what they were talking about. He remembered filming The Kid with the Golden Arm, remembered the mountain campsite where Chang Che found him, remembered the permission to make the villain laugh. But he couldn't picture the finished product. Couldn't recall specific scenes or lines beyond what he'd improvised on set. In interviews, he was honest about this. "I was there," he'd say, "but I don't remember it the way you do." For him, the film existed only in those few weeks of shooting. Everything after was someone else's memory, someone else's experience. He'd given the audience a villain, but he'd never met that villain himself. And he liked it that way, preferring to stay in the moment, rather than watching time fold back on itself through the mirror of a movie screen.
Number 18.
The film's release almost started a riot. Not because audiences hated it, because they loved it too much. When The Kid with the Golden Arm premiered in Hong Kong, the lines wrapped around the block. Theaters scheduled extra screenings, adding midnight showings to meet demand, but they underestimated how passionate the crowd would be. At one cinema, a screening sold out within minutes. Fans who'd waited hours were turned away, told to come back tomorrow. They refused. Arguments broke out. Someone threw a bottle. Security was called, but they were outnumbered. The crowd pushed forward, trying to force their way into the theater, not violently, not with intent to harm, just with the desperate insistence of people who needed to see this film tonight. The theater manager made a split decision: open the aisles, let people stand, pack the theater beyond capacity, fire codes be damned. Over 500 people crammed into a space meant for 300. Some stood in the aisles, others sat on steps. A few actually sat on the floor in front of the screen, necks craned upward. When the lights went down and the film began, the entire theater erupted. Cheers, gasps, shouts at the screen. During the final fight, the audience was so loud you couldn't hear the dialogue, but no one cared. The energy in that room, the collective fever of hundreds of people experiencing something together, it became legendary. That opening night proved Shaw Brothers had a hit, not just financially, but culturally. The Kid with the Golden Arm wasn't just a movie, it was an event, a shared experience that demanded to be witnessed in a crowd. Number 19. Lo Meng knew he'd never play a role like this again. Not because he lacked talent or opportunity, but because his body couldn't take it. The golden arms had destroyed his joints. Years of martial arts training had already worn down his knees, his shoulders, his spine. But 3 months wearing those brass gauntlets, absorbing impacts, performing stunts while carrying extra weight, it accelerated the damage exponentially. After filming Wrapped, he could barely lift his arms above his head. Simple tasks like opening jars or turning doorknobs sent sharp pains through his wrists. Doctors told him he'd developed early arthritis, that the cartilage in his shoulders was deteriorating faster than it should for someone his age. They recommended rest, physical therapy, possibly surgery. But Lo Meng couldn't rest. Shaw Brothers had him scheduled for 3 more films that year, so he pushed through, masking the pain with medication, adjusting his fighting style to compensate for his limitations. He became more defensive in his choreography, relying on blocks and counters rather than aggressive strikes. Audiences didn't notice. Critics praised his evolution as a performer, his maturity. But Lo Meng knew the truth. He wasn't evolving, he was deteriorating. The Kid with the Golden Arm had been his peak, the role that made him a star, but it had also been his breaking point. In later interviews, when asked if he had any regrets, he'd pause, roll his shoulders unconsciously, feeling the permanent ache that never quite went away. Then he'd smile and say no. Some roles are worth the damage. Some characters demand everything you have. And if you're lucky enough to find one, you give it willingly. Number 20. The film didn't win awards. It wasn't nominated for anything significant. Critics dismissed it as lowbrow entertainment, excessive violence without substance. But decades later, something strange happened. Film schools started screening it. Not as a guilty pleasure or a curiosity, but as a masterclass in visual storytelling. The way Chang-Che used color to indicate danger, red flooding the screen before violence erupted. The way Tang Chia choreographed fights in single takes, forcing the audience to experience the full exhaustion of combat. The way the golden arms themselves became a character, not just a weapon, but a symbol of bearing weight others couldn't. Academic papers were written analyzing the film's structure, its influence on action cinema, its place in the Shaw Brothers pantheon. The Criterion Collection considered it for restoration, though rights issues prevented release. Directors like Quentin Tarantino and John Woo cited it as an influence, not always by name, but in their approach to staging violence as ballet. And somewhere in that critical reassessment, The Kid with the Golden Arm transformed from exploitation film to art. Not because it had changed, but because audiences finally caught up to what it had always been. A perfect distillation of martial arts cinema at its most pure, most dangerous, most alive. It never needed awards to matter. It just needed time and people brave enough to watch it without looking away. Bonus fact. After the film wrapped, the Golden Arms disappeared. Not lost, not destroyed, gone. Lo Meng assumed the props department kept them for future productions or museum displays. The studio claimed they'd been returned to storage but couldn't locate them when collectors came asking years later. Some said they were melted down for the brass. Others insisted a private collector bought them off a crew member. The truth emerged decades later during an estate sale. Chang-Che's widow was selling his belongings, and buried in his garage, wrapped in old newspapers, were the golden arms. He'd taken them home the day filming ended and never told anyone. His widow said he'd occasionally take them out late at night, hold them, remember. Maybe the weight reminded him of what it took to make that film. Maybe he just wanted to keep one thing that the studio couldn't take back. When they were finally auctioned, they sold for over $50,000 to a collector in Japan who displays them in a private martial arts museum. You can't touch them, you can't wear them, but you can stand there and imagine carrying that weight. Imagine the pain and the glory. Imagine being the kid who wore golden arms and became legend.